If you ever get to hear from any Muslim, doesn't matter what state they are are they sheikhs, are they doctors, are they professors, are they just a missionary, are they just a dawah gangs, are they polemists, are they lay Muslims, or they are nobody Muslims, the moment they question the Christian scripture, all you need to remember, people, they are apostate. They do go against Allah. They do go against Muhammad. And especially when the Islamic Dawah team does that, remember, they are intentional apostate. Of course, I do hope the flowers and chocolates will come to me just not being Christian and not practicing the law of apostasy on them. Recently, one of the best deceivers of the Islamic Dawah team, Adnan, expressed that he has a concern about Christian scripture and he have a concern about Christian God. He's apostate. He's apostate Dawah team. Apostate Islamic Dawah team. So, we will watch him. And then recently also I did have Anthony Rogers in the channel where he actually handled those questions. And then we will get to hear proper answer to those questions. But remember, especially if you are a missionary, before you make a statement, you should be doing your homework. And this is second time Adnan is on the records with doing zero homework before speaking anything. So let's hear this painful couple of seconds from apostate Islamic Dawah team Adnan Rashid and hear amazing response to Adnan Rashid from Anthony Rogers. Of course, his session was not specially designed to respond to Adnan Rashid, but it will help us to think through how Islamic Dawah team become apostate.
He wants to kill indiscriminately. How is that God loving? Is the question. How does this God love those he dislikes?
So I'll start with one of the most famous ones, if that's okay. Can you tell us why or what kind of God would allow approximately 32,000 virgins to be raped, according to Muslims? Numbers 31. Let me know if you want me to read the scripture or anything, or if you want me to.
Okay, no, that's fine. I have it here, Numbers
Okay.
31. Yeah, so first of all, they're reading the notion of rape into this, and one of the things I often observe is you often learn a lot about people by what they see. People have a remarkable ability not to see something that's there and to see something that's not there, right? And you can see this in any number of ways. Some of them are very benign, innocent, not significant. But like if I'm driving down the street and there's a sign off to the side that says something on it, I might initially think I see a word and then turn and look and it's actually something else. Like I might think I see the word God and then I turn and I look and the sign says good burgers 5 miles down the street or something like that, right? Part of what that reflects is just that I'm usually thinking about the Lord, right? Or the Lord is important to me. So just this kind of sign off to the right will just sort of from my peripheral vision, I might initially think that it says God. I turn and look, and it just says the word good, right? Well, you get that kind of thing. People do that all the time, right? But you often get it in very negative ways as well. And here, what I'm suggesting is Muslims who are familiar with their own sources, with their own book, their own prophets' practices, where you do in fact have rape, even though they often try to smooth this over and make it look better, but they know in their own heart of hearts that these are very desultory things, unsavory things that their prophet did. So when they read the Bible, they're reading it through Muslim lenses. Just like a person who's jaundiced, right, sees things in yellow. Muslims look at the scripture through jaundiced eyes, and so when they come to a text like Numbers 31, they read it in a Islamic fashion. They don't read it for what it is in its own context. But let me read the passage and just show how many things that they're not understanding here. In Numbers 31, it says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 'Take full vengeance for the sons of Israel on the Midianites. Afterward, you will be gathered to the people.'" So here, notice that this, to begin with, is something that God is telling them to do as an act of vengeance. In other words, God is using Israel as the instruments of his wrath against the Midianites. This presupposes that the Midianites did something, right? This is a divine judgment. God is now authorizing or deputizing, if you will, Israel as his people, as the instruments of his wrath against the Midianites. So this is divine judgment that's in view, and Israel is going to be the agents by which God carries out his judgments. So again, it presupposes a backdrop of some kind of flagrant thing that was done by the Midianites that brings down this kind of judgment. So then in verse 3, it says, "Moses spoke to the people, saying, 'Arm men from among you for the war, that they may go to war against Midian to execute the Lord's vengeance.'" There it is again, the Lord's vengeance on Midian. "1,000 from each tribe of all the tribes of Israel you shall send to the war." So there were furnished from the thousands of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. Moses sent them 1,000 from each tribe to the war, and Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, to the war with them, and the holy vessels and the trumpets for the alarm in his hand. By the way, a lot of this, here you have Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest. One of the things this is noting here is that by having Phinehas the priest and others go with them with the holy vessels, it indicates the nature of this as God's judgment. Here are the priests involved in this, right? So this is a holy thing that they're engaging in. It's God's justice that's being exacted against the Midianites. So again, the note of justice is sounding throughout this text. This is a response against the Midianite evil. So verse 7 says, "They made war against Midian, just as the Lord had commanded Moses, and they killed every male." They killed the king. Now this is where people start, perking their eyebrow. This is where Muslims, their inner, perversity starts to read itself into the text. It says to kill every male. Okay. Then in verse 8, it says they killed the kings of Midian along with the rest of their slain, Evi and Rechem and Zur and Hur and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. They also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with the sword. The sons of Israel captured the women of Midian and their little ones, and all their cattle and all their flocks and all their goods they plundered. Then they burned all their cities where they lived and all their camps with fire. Okay, and then it goes on. And then it goes on to talk about, I'll just skip down to verse 13. It says, "Moses and Eleazar the priest and all the leaders of the congregation went out to meet them outside the camp. Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the captains of thousands and the captains of hundreds who had come from service in the war. And Moses said to them, 'Have you spared all the women? Behold, these caused the sons of Israel,'" here's the critical line, "'these caused the sons of Israel through the counsel of Balaam to trespass against the Lord in the matter of Peor. So the plague was among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and kill every woman who has known man intimately, but all the girls who have not known man intimately spare for yourselves. And you camp outside the camp 7 days,'" and then it goes on. So here's what Muslims are suggesting. The purpose of this war is Israel's going to go in because they're trying to get the women, right? And they're trying to get the war booty. And why would that be? Because that's exactly what Muhammad and his men did when they went in and conquered people who hadn't done anything against them, right? Yeah. But what you see here is that this is an act of judgment. What is the sin or the crime that Midian had committed? Well, we're told here, the women enticed Israel to sin. This harkens back to the Balaam affair. That's why it also mentions Balaam being killed here in this. Remember that Balaam is approached by Midian to curse the sons of Israel. But as much as Balaam wants to do so, because they're going to give him money for this, He's not able to do so because he says, I can't curse those whom God has blessed. But then Balaam gets this bright idea. Balaam says, if the Lord is the one who's the source of blessing for Israel that makes it impossible for them to be cursed and for Midian to then prevail against them, then what we need to do is we need to turn the Lord against Israel. And how could we do that? Well, the Lord is holy, right? And so one way we could do so is by enticing Israel to sin against the Lord. And so what was the sin that they tried to entice Israel into? Well, they got the Midianite women to go and try and seduce the Israelite men. This is one chink in a man's armor, right? So these women go in, they're pagan women. So it's not just that they're being enticed to women who aren't their wives, or maybe in addition to their wives, but in either case they're not married to. But in addition to that, they're pagan women. And as God says over and over again, His people are not to intermingle with unbelievers. And part of the reason for that is because they will also draw their hearts away to their deities, to their false gods, because men will try to, please them or what have you. So, and then of course you have the fact that when a man and a woman have relations, they are in some sense becoming one flesh, right? Just like we learned in Genesis 2.
Yeah.
Paul tells us in Corinthians that when a person unites himself to a harlot, he's becoming one flesh with her. And how can a person who is the temple of the living God then join himself to a prostitute, the servant of an evil God, of a false God? And so this is the heinous nature of the sin. And it was the women in particular who were the instruments or the agents enticing Israel into this act. This is why God says then to kill the women, all the women who knew a man, right? It's specifically the women who had had relations with men who are targeted here. The men too, because they're the fighting men. They're the ones that are behind this in many ways, and are ultimately seeking to waylay Israel and do them in. And so, as a matter of just fact, what this leaves then are all the virgin women and the children, right? Because they hadn't sinned, they weren't complicit in the act. And so, what are these women now going to be doomed to never be able to be married, to never be able to be provided for? In an ancient culture, these women wouldn't have been able to easily get along on their own. I mean, there were any number of difficulties facing a woman in the ancient world. And in any case, even apart from those things, it's a natural desire on the part of anyone to be married. So my point here is simply that these women are by default left alive because they weren't involved in the sin, in the crime. And God is saying that these women then are free to be incorporated into Israel. This is actually now a blessing in this way, because now they're being able to have full status in the Israelite community. They're not being kept as slaves. They have the right to be joined to an Israelite man and have the full privileges of an Israelite woman. So that would be my answer to that question.
Okay, so there is nothing in this chapter indicates that there is rape going on. It is just because the tradition of Muslim mind is that's what Muhammad did. Therefore, we would expect people before Muhammad to practice the same thing. Therefore, like their hearts and their minds are dirty or inclined towards wrong way. And we when we look at the passage, we see actually women are taking people of God away from God. Therefore, God is practicing His judgment on them. And also, if anyone wants to kind of look at what happens to those women, please read Deuteronomy chapter 21, where you will see how like those girls are not there to be raped. They will be looked after. They will be given time to mourn for their bereavement, and then it goes on.